Hello, I'm the Trek Lad, arbiter of good Star Trek, and this is my review of the first season episode of Star Trek the Original Series, Arena. In this episode, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise pursue a mysterious enemy vessel suspected of violently destroying a Federation outpost. But just as they prepare to strike, an unseen power intervenes, forcing Kirk and the enemy captain to settle their conflict in a fight to the death on a desolate asteroid. Stripped of his crew and technology, Kirk must rely on his wits and the barren landscape to survive against his formidable opponent. But as the battle unfolds, he faces an even greater challenge, confronting his own thirst for vengeance and the true cost of victory. This is undeniably one of Star Trek's most famous episodes, the one that gave us Kirk versus the Gorn, which is up there with the most legendary images in the entire franchise. It's a visual that has been etched into pop culture, a moment that's been parodied and lovingly recreated in just about everything from The Simpsons to the Bill and Ted movies. Countless fans and even some of the creatives who would go on to work for Star Trek cite this as one of the episodes that got them into the show. Even my dad, despite not remembering the title, was able to give me a near perfect play-by-play of the episode. Clearly, there's a lot of nostalgia tied into this one. But as famous and as beloved the episode is, I don't think it's very good. Arena has some great ideas, particularly its message about rejecting violence, which is classic Trek, but the execution is clunky to say the least, the pacing is all over the place, and the episode is filled with baffling contrivances that I find impossible to ignore. It's an episode that's both fascinating and frustrating in equal measure, and is one that I found very hard to score, mainly because despite all of its issues, it's still an episode that I love, but also because I don't want to piss off my dad, and according to this channel's analytics, about 100% of my audience. Despite my issues, the episode's opening and most of its first half is very strong. The cold open might be one of the best of the show's entire run, a shocking turn that throws Kirk and the away team into chaos and horror. For a brief moment, Arena plays like a war movie with destruction and relentless attack that sends the crew scrambling for cover, looking for survivors, of which there aren't many. It's a strong and intense opening sequence, a testament to the show's ability to create thrilling, high-stakes drama on a TV budget. From here, the episode switches from a war survival thriller into something more like an intergalactic car chase. Hell-bent on revenge, Kirk orders the Enterprise to pursue the attackers at all costs. But while Kirk's gut instinct is to strike back, Spock urges caution, questioning the need for an immediate retaliation and urging Kirk to think before taking action that could plunge the Federation into war. Their clash of ideologies is fascinating to watch and is classic Star Trek. Ethics versus emotion, logic versus instinct, and it all works brilliantly here. Kirk isn't being unreasonable, he's reacting as any human would in the face of what looks like an unprovoked massacre. But Spock, being the rational one in the room, acts as the counterbalance. The two aren't just determining the best course of action to take here, they're debating the morality of vengeance. If the entire episode had been built around the chase and this very interesting interpersonal conflict, it could have been one of the best episodes of the entire show. But then the rest of the episode happens. The Metrons appear out of nowhere, completely derailing what had been up until this point a tense and intriguing episode. Did we really need this? The story had already established a dramatic conflict between Kirk and Spock that, had it been allowed to reach its natural resolution, would have probably come to the exact same conclusion. But no, all this rich drama gets tossed out the nearest airlock in favour of wordy exposition, a slow and clunky fistfight, and some pretty egregious hypocrisy, but more on that in a bit. As soon as Kirk and the Gorn find themselves transported to Vasquez rocks, the pacing grinds to a halt. What had been a gripping chase suddenly becomes an excuse for some brainless monster action. All of the stuff between Kirk and Spock is completely dropped in favour of Kirk awkwardly throwing fists at this lumbering, rubber-suited lizard for what feels like forever. The setup and execution of all this is just bizarre. Kirk and the Gorn are given communicators, and for Kirk, this becomes a clunky way for him to speak his thoughts out loud for the viewer's benefit. Despite this being an attempt to bridge the divide between warring species, the two aren't allowed to contact their ships. Why? Don't know. Meanwhile, the crew are allowed to watch Kirk struggle, like some sort of Interstellar UFC event, but they're not allowed to intervene. Again, why? Again? Don't know. Nothing about this really makes any sense. It's just one contrivance after another, all designed to force Kirk into this one-on-one showdown that, quite frankly, isn't really that exciting. While iconic, the Vasquez rock setting doesn't do the episode any favours. Star Trek always made the most of its budget, but shooting this sequence in broad daylight only exposes the episode's weaknesses. The Gorn costume, already stiff and awkward, looks even worse under the harsh sunlight. The giant boulders wobble at the slightest touch, and the fight choreography is slow and laboured. It's a rare example of a set probably being better than something shot on location. Had this been set in a darker, more atmospheric setting, say something like the foggy caves we'd later see in The Devil in the Dark, this could have masked the limitations of the production and added some much needed tension. Clearly Trek learned its lesson here, as every subsequent depiction of the Gorn has taken a less is more approach, showing them as boogeyman-esque creatures striking from the shadows. Oh, and look! It's far more effective. Another frustrating aspect is watching Kirk slowly and painfully piece together the fact that he can make gunpowder. The Metrons state that there are materials on the planet that can be used as weapons, but despite this, he still takes an agonisingly long time to connect the dots. Adding to the awkwardness of it all, Kirk takes several moments to calmly monologue through his discoveries, almost as if he's on some sort of leisurely expedition rather than locked in a brutal fight for survival. He's literally in a fight to the death with a reptilian killing machine, yet the episode keeps breaking the tension to let Kirk play amateur geologist. But having said that, the payoff, where he finally assembles the makeshift cannon and fires it just in time, is a genuinely effective moment. It's the one part of all this that actually carries some tension, and seeing Kirk triumph through intelligence, as slow as it was coming, rather than brute strength, is very much in keeping with the spirit of Trek. On the subject of Trek's spirit, the underlying message of Arena is undeniably powerful. Kirk realising that the Gorn may not be the aggressors after all is an important moment, one that forces both Kirk and us the viewer to challenge our perspective and reconsider the Federation's role in this conflict. McCoy even has a moment earlier in the episode where he wonders if they're the ones in the wrong rather than the Gorn. Considering the episode aired during the Vietnam War, it's not hard to see the real-world parallels, and it's these moments and ideas that elevate the episode. But despite all this, Kirk's change of heart still feels rushed and mostly unearned. Right until the very last moment, he'd been consistently depicted as hell-bent on revenge, throwing boulders and building a weapon to kill his opponent. And then all of a sudden, he just stops, almost as if he'd heard McCoy's words from light years away. It's a great idea, but like much of this episode, the execution lets it down. I can't end this review without talking more about the Metrons, you know, the supposedly enlightened beings who come out of nowhere, hijack the episode, and declare themselves to be the ultimate arbiters of morality. But let's actually look at what they do. They don't mediate the conflict between the Federation and the Gorn. They don't seek understanding, diplomacy, or any kind of discussion. No, they just force Kirk and Gorn into a brutal one-on-one fight to the death. They strip both of their crews, give them weapons, cut off their ability to communicate with their ships, and then just sit back and watch. And at the end, after Kirk shows his out-of-nowhere mercy, what do? They offer him the chance to blow up the Gorn ship and kill everyone on board. So much for the enlightened pacifists, eh? And they even have the gall to tell Kirk that one day we might be on their level. What a bunch of fucking hypocrites. Arena is one of Star Trek's most famous episodes, but is also one of its most frustrating. The first half is fantastic, delivering a tense chase and an excellent moral debate between Kirk and Spock. The second half, however, is a slow, clunky, and often ridiculous action sequence that undermines its own messaging through poor execution. The themes of pacifism, the dangers of revenge, and the complexities of war are all compelling, and the episode does deserve credit for tackling these ideas. But the presentation just leaves a lot to be desired, and the Gorn fight, while iconic, is just too sluggish and silly to take seriously. Sorry, Dad. Scoring this episode is pretty tough. The elements I really like, but the elements I don't, I really don't. I feel completely split down the middle here, so for that reason, I'm going to give Arena a 5 out of 10. But what did you think of this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? How would you rate it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more Star Trek reviews, and until next time, live long and prosper.